I didn't know Oscar Wilde when I was 7 years old. What I knew was this: a plastic pumpkin bucket heavy with candy could feel like the greatest treasure in the universe. And Halloween night, that was the annual pilgrimage where we little pilgrims knocked on doors not for blessings, but for bite-sized chocolates. I can still hear the sound, that delightful rattle when a neighbor's hand dropped candy into the bucket. A Snickers here, a Reese's there, maybe even a lollipop that clinked against the plastic side. To a child, it was wealth, power, happiness, all condensed into sugar. We'd run down the sidewalk, shoes slapping against the pavement, the cool October air mixing with the sweet smell of chocolate wrappers. But here's the secret. It wasn't really the candy I remember most. It was the way the porch lights glowed like little beacons of welcome, the way strangers opened doors with a smile, repeating the ritual words, "Happy Halloween," as if for one night, everyone agreed to be a little kinder, a little more generous. Even the grumpy neighbor with the untended lawn gave out peppermints, and we cheered like we had won the lottery. Of course, kids aren't saints. We guarded our candy like dragons. I tipped my bucket onto the living room floor at the end of the night, sorting carefully, chocolates on one side, gummies on the other, the dreaded candy corn shoved into a corner. My siblings did the same. That's when negotiations began. If Wall Street ever needs ruthless traders, they should recruit children after Halloween. A Snickers for 2 lollipops. A Reese's traded for a pack of Skittles. Someone always tried to pass off a stale popcorn ball, swearing it was totally worth it. And yet, in the middle of all that ruthless candy capitalism, something softer happened. My sister once noticed I had fewer chocolates than her. Without making a big show of it, she nudged her pile toward me and said, "Take some. I don't even like these." I knew she did like them. That gesture, small, quiet, almost hidden, stuck with me. The candy is long gone, but the memory of her kindness hasn't melted away. As I grew older, I began to understand why that moment mattered. Halloween was never just about sugar. It was about community, about the thrill of knocking on a stranger's door and discovering generosity on the other side, about siblings learning that joy multiplies when it's shared, about the way even a single piece of candy, offered freely, can leave a memory far sweeter than the candy itself. That's the thing about growing up. The candy disappears quickly, but the lessons linger. As adults, we don't trade Skittles anymore, but we do trade time, attention, kindness. And just like back then, the hoarded pile never satisfies. What lasts are the moments when we choose to give away something we could have kept for ourselves. So when I think back to those Halloween nights, I don't just remember chocolate and costumes. I remember the feeling of belonging on a lit-up street, the sound of laughter in the dark, the warmth of realizing that even in a world that can be stingy, kindness has a way of showing up, sometimes disguised as a lollipop slipped quietly into your bucket. The candy is gone, the wrappers are lost, but the sweetness remains. Even in a pile of candy, I remember feeling there was never quite enough. Halloween, for a child, is supposed to be pure joy, a night of laughter, costumes, and endless sweets. But the truth is, tucked between the giggles and the sugar highs, there was always this tiny shadow, the worry that maybe I wouldn't have enough. I remember sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by wrappers and colorful piles of loot. My pumpkin bucket had tipped over dramatically, spilling treasure across the carpet. To anyone else, it looked like plenty, a mountain of sugar, enough to last weeks. But to me, as a child, it was never enough. I count the chocolate bars like gold coins, lining them up carefully, watching my siblings' piles out of the corner of my eye. Did they have more? Did they get the good kind? Was I somehow losing? That feeling of not enough was louder than the laughter around me. My sister's giggle when she unwrapped a rare king-size bar sounded like victory. My brother's casual toss of a lollipop into the air looked like abundance. And me? I was clutching my Reese's cups like they were fragile eggs, terrified someone would ask to trade and I'd be tricked into a bad deal. Childhood teaches generosity, yes, but it also whispers the first lessons of scarcity. The contradiction was sharp. I had more candy than I could possibly eat, yet still feared running out. Every time I gave a piece away, my stomach tightened. Would I regret it later? What if I wanted that Snickers tomorrow? I was surrounded by sweetness, but my hands held tight, my mind circling the same anxious question. What if it isn't enough? And isn't that the way adulthood sneaks in? Long before we manage bank accounts and paychecks, we rehearse those feelings with candy. We learn to measure, to compare, to guard what we have. We learn to hide favorites at the bottom of the pile, saving them for later, as if later will never bring more joy. We discover the odd truth that abundance can still feel like poverty when fear gets the first word. Looking back now, I see how much of life is haunted by that same worry. The paycheck comes in, but bills wait. The fridge is full, but tomorrow's list already whispers. We live in houses with closets overflowing, yet feel like we lack the right thing. That old childhood voice follows us. Is it enough? Am I enough? What I didn't know as a child is that enough is a slippery word. No matter how many pieces I had, if my heart was measuring against someone else's pile, I would always come up short. The lesson was hiding right there in the candy spread across the carpet. Joy doesn't live in counting. It lives in sharing, in tasting, in remembering the smile of the neighbor who dropped it in my bucket in the first place. I can still see one Halloween night when this truth cracked open for me. My youngest sibling had fewer pieces than the rest of us. Shorter legs meant fewer houses. His pile looked small, almost pitiful, next to ours. He tried to act tough, joking about liking the weird candy corn, but I saw the flicker in his eyes. In that moment, my own stash of chocolates suddenly felt heavy, almost guilty. What good were my Reese's cups if his pile was bare? So I slid a few pieces over. At first, it hurt. I won't lie. My hand hesitated. But when he looked up, eyes wide, grinning as if I had given him gold, something inside me loosened. The fear of not enough softened. I had less candy, but more joy. That was the contradiction of Halloween candy. Holding tight made me feel poorer, not richer. Loosening my grip made me feel like I had more than enough. It's a paradox I've carried into adulthood. Scarcity isn't always about the number of pieces. It's about the posture of the heart. When I reflect on those candy piles now, I see how childhood worries prepared me for adult lessons. Candy taught me that comparison steals sweetness. It taught me that hoarding doesn't soothe hunger, it feeds it. And it taught me that enough is rarely about quantity. Enough is a feeling born in generosity, in knowing that sharing doesn't shrink your joy, it multiplies it. Halloween, in its silly costumes and buckets of sugar, quietly gave me one of life's first lessons. Fear whispers, not enough, into every pile. But kindness answers, more than enough, with every act of sharing. And maybe that's why I can't forget the sound of candy dropping into my bucket. It wasn't just sugar, it was reassurance. It was community. It was a reminder that even when life feels scarce, joy has a way of showing up, sometimes wrapped in orange and black foil, sometimes in the simple act of a sister sliding chocolate across the carpet. That Halloween night, the carpet was littered with wrappers, our laughter echoing off the walls. The sugar rush had started to fade, and the piles of candy were smaller now, half eaten, half traded. We had played the game of bargaining, each of us clutching our favorites as if they were family heirlooms. But then came the moment that I didn't expect, the one that carved itself into memory deeper than any costume or chocolate ever could. My youngest brother sat quietly at the edge of the room. His pile was thin, mostly the rejects nobody really wanted. Hard peppermints, candy corn, those strange taffies wrapped in wax paper. He tried to look unbothered, drumming his fingers on the floor. But I caught the flicker in his eyes when he glanced at my stash. My pile was thick with chocolate bars, especially the prize of the night, peanut butter cups. I had 2 left, golden wrappers glinting under the lamp like treasure coins. They were my favorite, the kind I always save for last. Holding them in my palm, I felt powerful in the way only a child can feel, because I had something someone else wanted. But then, something shifted. Maybe it was the way his shoulders slumped, or the silence where laughter had been. Maybe it was just the tiredness of the night softening me. But in that quiet, I heard another voice inside. What good is candy if you're the only one smiling? I hesitated. My fingers tightened around the wrappers, my first instinct screaming to keep them. What if I gave them away and missed them later? What if generosity left me with nothing but regret? This was the crack, the tug of war between fear and love, between holding on and letting go. Slowly, almost reluctantly, I slid one peanut butter cup across the carpet toward him. He froze, then looked up at me with eyes wide as if I had handed him the moon. He didn't even unwrap it right away. He just held it, smiling so wide his face seemed to glow. And in that moment, something inside me cracked too. It wasn't the candy that filled me. It was the connection. The look on his face was richer than any sweetness melting on my tongue. For the first time, I felt the truth that would take me years to put into words. Joy grows bigger when it's shared. I still remember the strangeness of that feeling. My pile was smaller now. By the logic of childhood math, I had lost. But my heart didn't feel poor. It felt full, almost overflowing. The candy was gone, but something better had taken its place. A memory, a bond, a warmth that lingered longer than sugar ever could. That was the crack moment. The night when I learned that giving doesn't leave you empty. It leaves you more alive. Looking back, I realize how rare those moments are and how much they matter. We spend so much of our lives clutching our peanut butter cups, our time, our resources, our kindness, afraid that if we give too much, we'll run out. But the truth is, most of the sweetness in life doesn't come from what we keep. It comes from what we release. That night, the candy disappeared quickly, but the memory of giving has stayed with me, years longer than any wrapper. The carpet is long gone, the costumes forgotten, but the image of my brother's face lit up over a single piece of candy, that has never left. Sometimes the smallest act feels like the hardest, but it also becomes the most unforgettable. Leo Tolstoy once wrote, "The sole meaning of life is to serve humanity." Big words, almost too heavy for a child carrying a plastic pumpkin. But when I look back on those Halloween nights, I realize I was already learning the truth tucked inside his sentence, long before I could spell humanity. Because here's what candy taught me. Keeping everything doesn't make the joy last. Hoarding the peanut butter cups never stretched the sweetness across the days. If anything, it made me restless. I was counting, guarding, measuring. And the moment I gave one away, something opened in me that no pile of chocolate ever managed to do. Tolstoy believed happiness wasn't found in comfort or possessions. It was found in service, in offering something of yourself to another. And while children don't use the word service, they practice it all the time. It's there when a sister quietly trades her good candy so her little brother won't feel left out. It's there when a parent stays up late to carve pumpkins just to make a child's face light up. It's there when a tired neighbor still opens the door and drops a treat into your bucket with a smile. At 7 years old, I couldn't have written a philosophy essay, but I could feel the shift in my chest when I chose generosity over greed. And that feeling, that warm rush of connection, was Tolstoy's truth written in candy wrappers. The irony is, candy is fleeting. It melts, it crumbles, it disappears. But the memory of giving lingers. That night when I gave away my last peanut butter cup, I thought I was losing something. In reality, I was gaining a story I'd carry for decades. A simple act of kindness outlasted the very thing I gave. It's the same with so much of life. The meal you cook for a friend will be eaten. The dollar you give away will be spent. The time you share will pass. But the impression left behind, the invisible warmth of being cared for, that is what lingers. That is what makes people feel less alone. Tolstoy's reminder is radical in a world that praises accumulation. We are taught to count what we have, to guard our stash, to measure success in piles. But what if success was measured in smiles created, in burdens lifted, in connections made? What if the real wealth wasn't in how much candy you kept, but in how many times you made someone else's eyes light up? Halloween, of all things, shows us this truth in miniature. Every porch light is an act of generosity. Every hand dropping candy into a child's bucket is saying, "You matter. You're welcome here." Nobody gets rich giving out chocolate balls, but neighborhoods grow richer in spirit. Streets glow warmer. Children carry memories that last far longer than the sugar rush. As adults, we may no longer run house to house in costumes, but the principle hasn't changed. Every day is filled with small trick-or-treat moments, times when someone knocks on the door of your attention, hoping you'll share a piece of yourself. A smile at the cashier, a patient word to a child, a text that says, "thinking of you." None of these cost much, but to the person receiving, they feel like treasure. Tolstoy asked us to live not for ourselves, but for others. At first glance, it sounds like sacrifice. But if you've ever given away your last piece of candy, whatever that is for you, you know it doesn't leave you empty. It leaves you fuller in ways you can't measure. I think of my brother's grin that night, how his joy seemed to light up the whole room. And I realized Tolstoy was right. Meaning doesn't live in the candy you keep. It lives in the joy you pass on. The bowl will always empty. The wrappers will always pile up. But the sweetness of giving, that is the part that lasts. As children, our currency was candy. A Snickers bar was wealth. A lollipop was leverage. A peanut butter cup was pure gold. But growing older teaches us that candy changes shape. The treasures we trade now aren't wrapped in foil. They're wrapped in time, in attention, in the simple sweetness of care. Think about it. As adults, we rarely sit on the carpet and swap chocolate, but we still negotiate over piles. Our piles just look different. Hours in the day, money in the account, energy at the end of a long week. And just like when we were kids, the temptation is the same. Hold tight, protect what's mine, save the best for myself. Yet the lesson I learned all those Halloweens ago still whispers. Joy multiplies when shared. What does that look like in daily life? Sometimes it's as small as a cup of coffee. You buy one for a colleague who looks worn out. They sip it, surprised, maybe even a little embarrassed by the gesture. But later, you see it in their face. The way a small kindness shifted their day. That's candy. Not chocolate, but sweetness just the same. Or maybe it's a text you finally sent. "Hey, I was thinking of you today. How are you?" It takes 10 seconds, costs nothing. But to the friend who's been feeling invisible, it lands like a Reese's cup on an empty pile. It says, "You're not forgotten. You matter." That's candy too. Even attention itself is a treat. In a world where everyone is half distracted, scrolling through feeds and juggling noise, to give someone your undivided presence is rare and precious. Listening fully, without checking the phone, without rushing to answer, is like handing over the king-size ball. People can feel the difference. Presence is one of the sweetest gifts we can give. And then there are the tiny, everyday acts we almost dismiss. Holding the door open, thanking the bus driver, complimenting the cashier's earrings. These moments seem small, almost throwaway, but so did handing over a single lollipop to a younger sibling. Small doesn't mean meaningless. In fact, small is where sweetness lives. I think Tolstoy would nod here. Service isn't always grand sacrifices. It's the daily habit of giving bits of sweetness we could have kept for ourselves. The trick is, we often underestimate their value. We assume people don't notice, but they do. Just like I still remember my sister sliding chocolate across the carpet. People remember the little ways you make them feel seen. And here's the paradox. When you give away these candies of adulthood, your time, your kindness, your attention, you don't run out. Not really. Somehow, the more you share, the more you realize you have. It's as if life keeps replenishing the bowl once you stop guarding it so fiercely. Of course, the old scarcity voice still shows up. What if I don't have enough time for myself? What if I give too much and end up drained? And those are real concerns. But giving doesn't always mean grand gestures. It means choosing to loosen your grip just a little. To say, "Here, take one piece, I want you to have this." 3 small practices can help. Write 3 morning intentions. Before the day begins, jot down 3 ways you might hand out candy, whether that's patience, gratitude, or presence. Pause before you rush. Take 3 breaths before opening the laptop, so you start the day with presence instead of scarcity. Offer one thank you. It could be a message, a smile, or a spoken word. The form doesn't matter, the giving does. The point isn't to change your whole life in one night. It's to remember that every day, little doors are knocking, neighbors in costumes you can't see, co-workers, friends, strangers at the grocery store, waiting for you to open up, to drop a little sweetness into their bucket. We can spend our adult lives hoarding energy, guarding time, keeping our best pieces hidden at the bottom of the pile. But what lasts are the memories of what we shared. Not the coffee we drank, but the coffee we offered. Not the silence we filled, but the silence we softened with care. The candy of childhood taught us the pattern. The candy of adulthood is ours to give away, piece by piece, moment by moment. And each act, however small, multiplies into something larger than sugar ever could. Connection, belonging, love. The night winds down the way all Halloweens eventually do. The laughter of children grows fainter. Footsteps scatter back toward their homes, and the porch lights start blinking off one by one. But on my step, the bowl still sits, lighter now, nearly empty, yet glowing softly under the porch light. It feels less like a container of candy and more like a symbol of something much larger. I lean against the door frame, watching wrappers tumble across the sidewalk like tiny autumn leaves. My bucket as a child is long gone. The costumes, the sugar rush, the thrill of comparing piles, they've all faded into memory. Yet this bowl by the door feels timeless, a reminder that the joy of Halloween has never really been about how much we collect, but about how much we give. I think of all the hands that dipped into bowls tonight. Small hands painted with glitter, nervous hands clutching a parent's coat, even shy teenagers who pretended they didn't care but still lit up when they felt welcome. Each piece of candy was ordinary, chocolate, sugar, a wrapper. But in the giving, those pieces became something extraordinary, a message that said, "You belong, you're welcome here." And isn't that what we're all still hungry for, long after childhood? Not the candy itself, but the assurance that we matter to someone, that someone is glad we knocked on their door, that someone is willing to open their hand, even if it means having a little less for themselves. I picture myself again on the carpet, years ago, sliding a peanut butter cup to my brother. That small act, so simple, so unplanned, became sweeter than the candy itself. It taught me that generosity doesn't empty us. It fills us with something no bucket can carry, a kind of sweetness that lingers in the heart long after the sugar is gone. As adults, our candy looks different. We don't guard chocolate bars, but we do guard our time, our energy, our affection. We count hours, stack savings, ration kindness as if the supply might vanish. But the bowl by the door whispers a different truth. What you give multiplies. What you hoard diminishes. The irony is, candy disappears quickly. The wrappers go to the trash. The sugar rush fades. The stash always runs out. But the memory of giving, that lasts far longer. Decades later, I don't remember the exact taste of those candies, but I do remember the faces, the smiles, the small sparks of joy I witnessed when someone received. So maybe that's the quiet genius of Halloween. Underneath the costumes and the sugar, it's a practice in generosity. It's a rehearsal for adulthood, teaching us that happiness isn't doubled by what we stash away, but by what we open our hands to share. I look at the bowl one last time. A couple of stray lollipops clink together in the bottom. They aren't much, but if another knock comes at the door, I'll offer them gladly, because the sweetness isn't in keeping them. It's in seeing another smile as they walk back down the steps, lighter, happier, seen. And maybe that's the lingering question for all of us tonight. Whose joy will you sweeten today? The bowl will empty, the night will end, and the candy will be gone. But the memory of kindness, that is what lingers. That is what grows. Happiness, like chocolate, melts best when shared. And when we share it, it doubles, spreading warmth far beyond what we could ever keep for ourselves. So leave the light on. Keep the bowl by the door, because someone will always come knocking and you will always have something to give.